Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour about 2 years ago, and it's great to have him back with us tonight. He was out last week, the week before. And those of you who've been here before know how it works. We hit a very winning formula very early on. 2 great writers reading great stories for their favorite nonprofits, and it works out pretty great. So we're doing that again tonight. Tonight's readers are Stephen Case and Premee Mohamed. If you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to tonight's featured nonprofits, the IOCC and Zoe's Animal Rescue. Stephen Case is reading for International Orthodox Christian Charities. IOCC offers emergency relief and development programs to those in need worldwide without discrimination and strengthens the capacity of the Orthodox Church to so respond. Programs emphasize not just saving lives, but rebuilding them with services that include refugee assistance, education, agriculture and food security, and economic opportunities. There is a current Ukraine Response Fund. You can learn more at iocc.org. Premee Mohamed is reading for Zoe's Animal Rescue. Zoe's Animal Rescue is a volunteer-run shelterless rescue in Edmonton, Alberta. All Zoe's foster animals are fully vetted before adoption. This includes a wellness exam, spaying or neutering, microchip insertion, routine vaccinations, and parasite treatment. Many of these animals come in with injuries or ailments which quickly and easily reach several $100s, occasionally into the thousands, and your donation can help immensely, even if you're too far away from Edmonton to foster those animals. You can learn more at zoesanimalrescue.org. If you're here on Zoom, please feel free to leave your camera on. It can be really nice for our readers to make eye contact with people. Chime in on the text chat off on the right if you like. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you so much, but please understand that we may not be looking at your messages right away. That said, let's get to the good stuff. Our first reader tonight is Stephen Case. Stephen, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. Stephen Case is a writer of speculative fictions and a historian of science living and working in the Midwest. He has published over 40 short stories in places like Shimmer, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Orson Scott Card's Intergalactic Medicine Show, and Daily Science Fiction, and he reviews books at Strange Horizons. His book on 19th century astronomy, Making Stars Physical, was published by University of Pittsburgh Press and shortlisted for the History of Science's Pfizer Award. And his essays have appeared at Aeon. Is it Aeon or Aeon?
That's a good question. Maybe Aeon?
Aeon or Aeon. It's got an A and an E, and that's why I'm confused. Feel free to chime in on the chat and tell me if I'm right or wrong. And his essays have also appeared in American Scientist. He lives on the internet at Stephen with a PH, rcase.com, and on Twitter at Stephen rcase. Stephen.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back. And thanks for all of you who are joining us tonight. I'm reading a story called What I Wrote for Andronicus. This was actually published originally in Idiomancer over a decade ago now. It was one of the first stories that I published, and it's still one of my favorites. So I'm excited to share it with you tonight. It's about trees, both here and in the hereafter. What I wrote for Andronicus. When I was dead, they called me Harold Halfhelm for a variety of reasons. Someone wrote a cycle of songs about it once, and they'd sing it in the evenings when I was very drunk. The silver goblets would spill, and usually there would be a bit of blood before it was all over. That's not what I'm writing about now, though. I'm writing about the tree, how it died, and what we did with it. I wouldn't normally have picked up a quill and written all this. I had held the pen long enough when I was alive, and it hadn't done me much good then. Here, there was much more to do with a good broadsword or spear. So when Andronicus brought me this parchment and a quill and asked me to write, I hoped my glare would be his answer. When he lingered, I growled, "You're the poet, you write it." He shook his head and said something about not everyone being able to write every story. Well, I don't want to write this one. But he left the parchment and the horn of ink and the quill And before I knew it, I had notched the quill with my dagger and dipped it in the ink, which was dark like wine. Andronicus wanted me to write about the tree. The poets called it a gyros, and the gods had a name the rest of us couldn't pronounce. It's dead now. I'm not sure I've written that yet. Apparently, Andronicus thinks I have something to say about it. I guess I do. The tree was up in the hills that overlooked the halls of the gods. From up there, you could see everything, all the meadows and forests that sloped down to where the sea sat at the horizon like a blue finger. It was huge, which you know if you've been here. The young dead don't raise their eyes much, but occasionally you'll see a new one stagger out of the foam and scan the beaches as if they're looking for someone. No one comes, and eventually, when their eyes get strong enough, they'll look up into the hills and see the ivory columns of the gods' houses. Then above and behind those all, at the foot of the mountains, the gray-green column of the tree, or at least they used to. The gods said it was the first sight of the tree that convinced those on the beaches that they were dead. No tree from before could have been so big. Sometimes it seemed that the sight of it was the only thing that got the new dead off the sands and up into the beaches. Now that it's gone, they wander the hills. They wandered like ghosts on the beaches. This quill wants to write of the tree's leaves, wide as Spanner's shield, blue and silver like the sea. When the breezes off the mountains blew through them, it was like a cloud was whispering secrets the gods didn't know anything about. It was tall enough that when the sun passed overhead, it left a trail of curled leaves as it wound through the branches. And one evening, when I was there with Helga of the Ivory Tower, we heard the branches creaking because the moon had gotten caught. We both had to climb up and free it. And if you think someone's skin looks fine by moonlight, wait and take a look when they're standing on a silver branch with their arms halfway around the moon. But the tree is gone now, as this quill of Andronicus's keeps reminding me. Besides being big, it was supposed to be old. There are things here you think are old. The stone table the gods sit around, for instance, or the well that Jared's slim fist had dug and lined with bricks so he could throw a stone down into hell. You think those things are old, but the gods built them themselves. The tree, though, if you believe what they say, was growing when there weren't any gods at all. But all those things about it, all those silver blue leaves that never changed, was why everyone that day in the hall stopped and stared, even the high gods at their table of stone, when Sugarfoot shuffled in through the golden doors holding one of the leaves, withered and brown as old parchment. I was sitting near the door. This wasn't because I knew what was coming. I want to get that straight. I had known trees before, but the trees here were different. The ones in the valleys with the bark of human skin, or the ones that would come down in the evenings and dance with you like they were half wind and half woman, they didn't follow the same rules as those from before. I had no idea the tree was dying, and I still don't know why it did. I was sitting near the door when Sugarfoot limped in, so I saw the dead leaf clearly. I thought it was the pages of old Doom's book, Sugarfoot muttered. He was supposed to be the oldest of the old gods and had a face dark and wrinkled as the soil. I thought he was finally throwing them out one by one. He blinked and stared around the hall. But it was a leaf from the tree, he barked, brandishing the thing. So maybe just as bad as old Doom in his book. No one in God's memory had seen the tree drop a leaf. There wasn't autumn here, and when leaves went red, it was usually because someone had bled on them. It was something as unthinkable as a falling sky. That was what we felt when we saw the wilted leaf. Had Sugarfoot walked in holding a dead, bloated star, I don't think we would have been any more shocked. Things don't often surprise you when you're dead. He passed slowly through the hall with the leaf, down to where Ogden himself sat in his silver throne. All the high gods and heroes clustered around him. The rest of us in the hall watched them speak together for a while, and none of us said anything. Then they called over some of the poets and some of the learned dead. There was more talk. Finally, Ogden stood and took down the golden spear that hung from the back of his chair. It was the spear that, when held, allowed only truth spoken. The tree is dying, he said. And then he sat down. The silence deepened. Things didn't die in the land of the dead. Sure, things got killed often enough. Wouldn't have been a very interesting place otherwise. I myself had broken blades on the backs of more than a few warriors, but that was simply the way of things. Come nightfall, the mead would flow, and everyone, whichever side of the blade they had been on, would wander back into the hall and drink again. Things got killed, but things didn't die. I notched my quill again after I had written that last, and it bucked in my hands like one of Theoden's minded blades. Andronicus has not returned, and the shadows have wandered from the forests to lay across the lawns with their heads pillowed in the grasses. I wonder what those who pass through the hall must think of me sitting here. I'm sure I look ridiculous, hunched over these scraps of parchment and hands smeared with ink like sap. The quill wants to write more of the silence that descended in the hall after Ogden spoke. Silence so thick you could see its wings in the rafters, but I bit off the nub and notched it again. I was sitting in the silence of that hall with the other dead, thinking about what Ogden had said when Broman of the heavy hand came to sit beside me and spoke quietly. His brows were furrowed. "What do you make of this, half-helm?" he asked. Broman had small eyes and a voice that made you hunch your shoulders against it. I shrugged. "It's the concern of the gods. Nothing you can do for a dying tree?" In the past, they say that Andronicus would give flesh to his books and let them walk about in the lands across the sea. If that is still the case, you may hear this story before you come here, and you may eventually understand why my hand tightened on the hilt of my blade when Broman spoke thus to me. There were certain things that were not spoken of here, and the first among these was anything of what had happened before. "Nothing," I said evenly. I forced my grip on the blade's hilt to relax. He looked at me for a while, then echoed my shrug and moved away. The next morning, the gods called everyone back to the great hall. Runners went through the gardens, and the silver trumpets were sounded at the gates. When I took my place along the ring of greater and lesser heroes that poured into the chamber and filled the space around Ogden's throne, the hall was filled with faces like foam on the sea. "The tree is dying," Ogden said when the legions of gods and heroes had gathered. "We've stood beneath its crown and seen the signs of death. This is not the way of things in the lands of the gods. We won't sit idly and watch this death," he went on. On his tunic, there was a silver tree, which I had always thought to be an image of the tree itself. And this silver tree shifted as he raised his spear. "Thus we have decreed, while the tree is yet whole, Hammerfast will fell it. We will use its wood to craft a gift for those who still dwell across the sea." When Ogden spoke those words, Hammerfast, who has many names in many places, raised his huge axe. That the flesh of the tree should be shaped into something of use was not unexpected. That it would be a gift for those beyond the sea, only slightly more. It was true that the ships no longer passed that way, and few of the bridges that spanned the sea were still whole, and those that were gave no passage. This, though, did not mean the gods had no thought for those who remained across the sea. Again, I found that Broman stood beside me. "They can do nothing to save it," he whispered. I shook my head. "They came over the sea as we did. They don't have the power they had once. You know this. Or the knowledge." Again, I shrugged and turned away. I realized he was baiting me, though I was not sure why. As I wrote before, the trees I knew before were not like the trees here. Those trees before had died all around me, and then, like now, I had been able to do nothing. After that, the voices swelled even louder, for once Ogden had said the wood of the tree would be used to fashion something, the gods and heroes argued about what form the gift should take. Old soldiers shouted for a forest of spears as long as Fingard is tall, but Fingard himself called for shafts to birth a cloud of 10,000 arrows. A god whose name I couldn't remember pulled himself up near a pillar and held his hands for silence. He explained that people no longer warred across the sea, and that instead would be better served by staves to lean on upon their travels. Some of the old gods nodded at this, though it seemed strange to the rest of us. Someone else called for a ship so that we could again sail the sea and perhaps beyond, for surely the wood from that tree would be fit to fashion a ship to pass beyond the sky. Again, some of the gods and heroes nodded, but the hall was vast, and soon other voices were added to the tumult. It continued like this for some time. The light had begun to fade, and sylvan forms lit lanterns on the pillars and in the gardens, and the horns of mead were passed, before Sugarfoot himself slowly made his way to where the gods took counsel at the center of the hall. He did indeed at that moment seem as old as they say he is, a form of stone ground down to dark earth by the march of countless years. When he spoke, his voice carried through the growing darkness. "The children of earth are tired," he said. "They don't need boats or beams, and they sure as shit don't need spears." The gods listened silently. "They need chairs. Solid chairs beside a hearth or on a porch. They need a place to sit." At this, there was again silence in the hall, and outside I could hear the first of the glowflies singing in the fields. I waited for the voices to rise again in argument, but they never came. Finally, Ogden nodded very slowly, took up his great silver spear and said, "It shall be done." I left the hall then, and when I walked outside and up the long rise beyond the houses of the gods, the tree was visible in the dark as a darkness rearing up before the mountains. In the night, no signs of death could be seen. The tree stretched upward, boughs branching and rebranching like veins beneath skin, like they were roots working their way up into a soil of blackness where the stars were flecks of brilliant stone. I was not alone. "But you shall raid the whole land through," someone quoted at my back, "and never a tree shall talk to you, though every leaf is a tongue taught true, and the forest full of eyes." "Chesterton," I said, turning to find Broman of the heavy hand. We looked up at the tree together in silence for a while. "You think you'd be used to this," he finally said. I shook my head. "You were a conservation ecologist," he muttered. I was quiet for a long time, rubbing the bridge of my nose where glasses had not perched for perhaps 100 years. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "There are those here who argue that what you did across the sea has a bearing on whether you end up here or elsewhere. I don't know about that. What I do know, though, and what anyone who drinks mead under the rafters in the gods' halls knows, is what I said earlier. Here, one does not speak of what had happened before. You who may hear this across the sea, will not understand because you think you know what your life is now. Broman knew this as well as any. American chestnut, elm, ash, cottonwood, he asked. Did it even matter? I looked up where the branches of the tree arched far above us. By the time you left, they were nearly all gone, Broman was saying. I waited. Were there any still alive when you finally died? There was a stand of cottonwoods in eastern Missouri, I said. I wasn't sure at that point that I was still talking to him. I felt I was answering a voiceless question from the leaves above. Do you think it mattered? Broman asked. You gave your entire career to saving them, but they still died. He went on then, speaking the words of challenge. The young dead find battles like the one we fought then foolish, perhaps. I've walked among them on the beaches, though, and their pale faces and dim eyes will never meet my own. They know nothing of the battles higher up than the blood spilled on stone or grass. They don't know the codes or why certain words must always be followed by the drawing of a sword. They linger by the shore and could not understand that last battle fought under the crown of that first tree. Broman and I understood. I don't really know, and neither does the stand quill, though it quivers like it has a secret why he issued the challenge beneath the tree. Regardless of his reasons, I'd like to think that poets will sing of the battle of Broman of the heavy hand and Harold Halfhelm beneath the tree for perhaps as long again as the tree stood. When his blade was finally broken and my own had found a home between his ribs, he laughed and said he hoped the tree drank blood. A few nights later, when the mead flowed again, he stood beside me in the hall. I shook my head at his unvoiced question. I did all I knew, I told him. I took your damn measurements, even a soil sample and a boring. The gods laughed. You know things don't work like that here. He shrugged and said nothing. Now the light has died here in the hall where I write, and were I to venture out under the dome of stars, I know that I would see many of those whom I feasted with at midday taking their places among the constellations. Someone has brought me a lantern, and I suddenly have sympathy for the scribes who say labor in caverns under the mountains. The words seem to dash first one way and then another in the flickering light of the flame. I should write now what happened to the wood of the tree, how it was felled and carved into Sugarfoot's chairs, though I can do no more than simply say it. Andronicus came back a moment ago, and I showed him what I had written and thought he would take it. He shook his head, though, and told me to finish. I wrote about the fight. I said, I thought you wanted me to write this thing because I was the last to draw a blade in the tree's shadow. Broman could have just as well written that, he said. Broman's an idiot. He waited, and the quill fluttered on the table. Is that how it works? I finally asked. Did the trees over the sea die because the true tree was up here dying all along? Is that why you made me write this? Andronicus reached across the table and grasped the quill. In his hand, I saw it for what it was, a single feather from a bird that had roosted for a time in the branches of that tree. I don't know, he said. Someone explained it to me once, but I didn't write it down. That was his answer. I stared at his back as he walked away, and then stared for a long time at the door he went through out into the night. He had placed the quill back on the table, When I got tired of staring at the door, I stared down at it, wondering if it could explain. Now it's in my hands again. The morning after the battle, after someone had taken Broman's body away, wood shavings from the tree soaked up his blood. Hammerfast hewed at its trunk all morning and evening, and halfway into the next day, his blows making the branches of the tree tremble and the leaves whisper like an approaching storm. No one could watch, and the gods all stood facing the sea. When it finally fell, it fell for a day. Its highest branches lay beyond the mountains of the gods, and the bulk of its trunk stretched to the horizon like a giant's corpse. Hammerfast took his awl and began to shave away the bark and shape its wood. There was enough wood for 7 chairs. As large as the tree had been, I thought there would have been enough for an army, but that's not how things work here. When Hammerfast was done, there were 7 chairs grained with every shade of gold and brown, and a pile of shavings, bark, and branches, which we burned. The sparks rose upward all night and thickened the sky with unfamiliar stars that never faded or fell. When dawn found us, we were sitting on a hill where the tree had been, with the absence of the tree filling the sky at our backs, and the gods were muttering about who would send the chairs across the sea. The envoys no longer pass between our lands, the gods said. Those across the sea expect no word from the lands of the gods, and thus it will be difficult to send this gift. Thor Thunderfist wanted to simply throw them across, while Aiden of the Unheard Song said she could carry them across by night. A young god wanted to summon a fleet of porpoises and maidenfish to ferry the chairs. The gods considered all, but shook their heads. The seas were stormy, they said. The nights of the cities of Earth no longer still enough for a song, and bad things always seemed to happen whenever Thor threw things. There was silence on the hill. Finally, Sugarfoot spoke. There's no crossing the sea with them, he said, leaning against his staff, but it gets colder every year. I feel it, and the tree felt it too. Soon the sea will be frozen. He paused and stretched, and his joints popped like stones. You use what's left of this wood, and you carve a couple good sledges to fasten to each. Then, when the seas are frozen, you have one of these young dead pull them across the sea. That's when the children of Earth will need them anyway. The gods were quiet for a while after this, quiet for so long that I thought they had not heard him. We waited, and the hills turned silently beneath us. Then Ogden nodded, and Hammerfast reached for his awl, and it was done. He fashioned 14 sledges, curved like the line of a bow, and attached a pair to each of the chairs. The gods carried them to a rise that overlooked the sea and sat them in a row where they slowly rocked back and forth in the breeze. That's it, and I've wiped this quill on my trousers for the last time, blown on the parchment to dry the ink. If, when Andronicus comes, he doesn't take this feather with him, I'm going to fletch the damn thing to the end of an arrow and shoot it into the sun. One more thing, it's saying, one more thing. Fine. The great stump of the first tree is still there, rising up like a broken hill or maybe a golden table where the tree once stood. Still a good place, and maybe I shouldn't say it, maybe it doesn't mean anything, but when Julia Half Moon and I lay there on its soft wood one afternoon, I noticed that it had sent up a few shoots from where the wood met the bark. They were tiny things with leaves barely larger than the ends of my fingers, but Julia smiled. Like I said, though, I don't know much of what it all means. I drink my mead with the gods and heroes in the evening, and sometimes I walk to where Sugarfoot sits in one of the chairs, looking out over the sea toward the cities of Earth. He says the warmth of the wood warms his bones. It's ending, he told me once, when I stood beside him, facing the blown foam of the sea. It's all changing. I looked back at where the tree had been, and at all the cold marble houses the gods had built for themselves, and at the beaches where the new dead still washed up like bones. From this distance, the houses of the gods looked like mausoleums dotting the hills. The wind picked up, and the chairs rocked back and forth, and the old god hunched his shoulders against the chill. Thank you.
Oh, that was amazing. I can't believe I had to wait 10 years to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for letting me share.
Well, tonight we have 2 scientists who write utterly gorgeous stories with us. So you just heard Stephen Cates, and next up we have Premee Mohamed. Premee Mohamed is an Indo-Caribbean scientist and speculative fiction author based in Edmonton, Alberta. She is an assistant editor at the short fiction audio venue Escape Pod and the author of the Beneath the Rising novel trilogy and several novellas, including Nebula Finalist and What Can We Offer You Tonight? Her short fiction has appeared in many venues and she can be found on Twitter at Premeesaurus and on her website at premeemohamed.com. Her first collection, No One Will Come Back for Us, will be released by Undertow Publications in spring 2023. Premee, welcome. Great to have you back.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me back.
Every chance.
Still having a feeling about Stephen's story. That was beautiful. Thank you for reading that. Yeah, so I thought tonight I would read a story called Everything is Part of Its Infinite Place, which was part of an anthology a couple of years ago out of Broken Eye Books. And the theme of it was kids and the weird, or kids and the uncanny. And, you know, kids are kind of like that to begin with, so it didn't take very much thinking to come up with a weird story that had a kid in it. Everything as part of its infinite place. The standing stones fell, and their golden shadows were crushed beneath them. When it seemed safe, Bunny rose and dusted himself off. The largest stone, the one the villagers called the weird, had missed him by inches. Around him, still in their circle, lay the other 8 monoliths, like the corpses of elephants on TV. In formation, they had seemed clearly but indefinably alive. Now they were just as clearly dead. As he stared, the rosettes of ancient lichen began to writhe, exposing bare patches of granite and fleeing through the grass like so many mice leaving a sinking ship. One scuttled over Bunny's shoe, and he drew breath to scream and stopped short, chest rattling with effort. For in the woods across the clearing, small, composed, leaning against the twisted stem of an ancient oak, had appeared another little boy. In the same khaki trousers and black Adidas trainers, in the same blue shirt, with the same school logo, with the same pencil-thin surgical tubing snaking from elbow to sleeve like the glutinous mark of a snail. It was him, he himself, as if a mirror had been propped against the tree. "Wait," said the other boy, "don't go." Bunny spun and ran, and though he soon slowed to a shivering lope, hunched over his aching ribs, he did not stop. Predictably, even inevitably, a tongue lashing awaited him at home. He was inured to these and focused on his breathing, while his mother reminded him that he, Parker Cartwright Spurley, had to be a team player with his condition, that he had to show some consideration, that he could not simply hair off like that again, that they had been about to call Officer Gupta again, and the poor man had enough on his plate without having to comb the woods for a thoughtless 11-year-old. And where was his phone? "Oh, I forgot it on the charger." His mother sighed. "Bun, if we've told you once, I'm sorry." He sat very still while his mother checked his tubing and ports and brushed back his slightly too long hair to touch the silvery coin of the vesticodone patch stuck below his ear. "You aren't allowed to run, you know that." "I'm sorry." "It's not an apology unless you understand what you did," she said briskly. "Now, why were you doing it if you know you're not to?" I think there was maybe a little earthquake," he said cautiously. "The stones in the meadow all fell over, and I saw, a boy who looked like me. I mean, he was dressed like me and everything." But what he meant to say, and could not, was that the boy had been him, not looked like him. Had been him, not a twin, not a robot, not a doppelganger, nothing he knew from books or films. Of course, he could not provide a name, which earned him a milder lecture about lying and trust, followed by the unnecessary indignity of being sent to his room where he had wanted to go anyway. "Want me to take you up, Bun?" his dad asked from behind his upraised magazine, as he always did. "No," said Bunny, as he always did. He climbed the stairs with his dinner proxy sandwich clamped in his teeth, both hands on the railings, and paused at the top, standing shoulder deep in a sunset that flooded the corridor with thick golden light. Unwatched, he ignored his own room and went into his brother's, opening the door as little as possible and shutting it at once, trying to assimilate the fragrant, dusty silence, make it part of himself. Every time he entered, every time he ate here, he knew he was losing this atmosphere. Marty had died 6 weeks ago, and the room almost, but not quite, smelled like the rest of the house. "Do you remember the last thing he said to you?" the therapist had said, eyes glittering with tears behind her clipboard. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Bunny had told her, though. A lifetime of being required to comply, promptly and silently, with the demands of adults had made her impossible to disobey, even in the fresh depths of his grief. Now he wished he had said nothing. He didn't say it for you, he thought, and it hadn't been anything much anyway, had it? What he had wanted to know, though no one would tell him, was whether it had hurt, whether the car had killed Marty instantly, or whether he had lingered almost till the gathering in the hospital chapel 10 hours later. "Do you want to see him?" said Mom, and Dad at once said, "He can't." And the tall doctor said, don't. "I do," Bunny said, but no one was listening. Marty would have known what to do about the imposter, Bunny knew. He would have come up with a plan. At the very least, he would have listened and not given him crap about going outside to play. They fret, don't they? But it's a weird way to live. At your age, I was 2 counties over every day after school. But you're not sick. You're not sick, Bun. Don't listen to them. You got a condition and you got drugs for it. They got to loosen your leash a little. Of course, after the funeral, Bunny could feel it as a tangible thing, no longer a slack lead, but a choke chain in a slip knot that would only get tighter the more he struggled. Desperate for air, he taught himself to cease moving. Sometimes, though, he still found himself outside in the meadow or up a tree, his phone buzzing ceaselessly in his pocket. Elopement, they called it. Life, Marty had said, and rolled his eyes. "You all right?" Bunny listlessly thumbed the smiley emoji and replaced his phone in his pocket. His friend Jamie watched him for a long time, then turned back to her notes, unsatisfied. The classroom was dark. So many of their lessons, like this one about natural disasters, were videos now that most of the class was surreptitiously texting or half dozing, only paying attention to keywords to fill out their worksheets. Bunny wrote, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes, Indonesia and America, fires, Australia and Canada, infestations, locusts. He thought, if I had been standing just one step closer, if I hadn't seen that slime mold, walked over, away from the stone, bent down. Earthquakes, New Zealand and Japan, diseases, 4C9B flu and cat, tsunamis, floods, drought. He thought, then I would be dead too. And I suppose I wouldn't see Marty again, because he'd go to heaven and I'd go to hell. And what's wrong? Jamie whispered when they trooped outside at midday. Bunny shrugged. This year, more than any other in their lifelong friendship, the other kids were shitting on her for hanging out with him. If he could spare her that, he would. But he wavered under her steady dark gaze and said, if you thought you saw, and for the second time, his breath was stolen from him. For the boy was back, the other him, trotting jerkily across the yard near the soft, half-ruined remnants of the Roman fort that ringed their school. He was towing someone Bunny knew slightly, a girl in the year below them, identifiable only by the brightness of her hair. They vanished into the shadow of the wall. His stomach flipped. The stones. If that had been a disaster, it had been of the unnatural sort. And who else had been there at the appearance of that evil? It's not me, he said, grabbing Jamie's arm. She tugged it away, startled. Look at him, it's not me. I don't see anything, it's just Una. She seized him in turn as he jerked towards the darkened corner. Bun, don't, you're not allowed to run. But they did anyway, as a shriek split the air, and only Bunny saw both the other boy vanish into the darkness and the snake at his feet rear up in horrified affront, as if it had been the one bitten. The mere presence of the snake was a terror in this place that had never had them, to children who only knew them, if they had been lucky enough to travel, behind the smeared plastic of the zoo exhibit. It paused in the midst of its escape, as if to show off its rainbowy blue blackness in the sun, meeting Bunny's stunned stare. Blue, whoever heard of a blue snake, he thought wildly, unable to move. Wait, we studied this. If it's bright, like bees, frogs, those poison frogs. The snake revealed the inky interior of its mouth, a pair of small golden fangs. Come with us, it whispered, then slipped behind the stones like water. Una rolled on the ground. Instinctively, Bunny dropped to his knees to protect her head, the scarlet hair dulled by silky dust. With insulting ease, someone flicked him away so that Jamie dove to catch him. Get away from her. What are you on about? Jamie gasped. He wasn't anywhere near. The other children pushed them away, and Una was half carried, half dragged to the nurse's office, and Bunny waited alone in the headmaster's office till there arose another faint chorus of screams. Somehow he had known there would be. He limped to the window, and by pressing his face to the uneven glass, he could make out the white and yellow form of the village's only ambulance weaving unsteadily as it exited the courtyard, its windscreen smeared with darkness, till it at last crashed into the big beech across the road, so hard that the back doors flew open, and the tree itself, ancient, thick-barked, and tubercular as a whale, swooned to the turf. The smudge roared as if in triumph and took to the sky. Bees, thousands of bees. But that's not what you saw. It is too what I saw. Bunny's mother fell silent, her lips pressed together in a smile indicating that she was not really angry. She just wanted to get to the bottom of this. Wasn't it funny that the school had sent her a garbled text telling her to come pick up her child at lunchtime? And wasn't it even funnier that he couldn't explain himself despite this prolonged and affectionate interrogation of his mental status? Bun, why would you do this? She lay a hand on his hair to soften the sting of it, stroking the mousy curls away from his stricken and beseeching gaze. Is it about Marty? Are you looking for attention at school? We talked about this. He shook his head, tears gathering from all four corners of his body and coalescing in his sinuses. He hoped he would not cry in front of her again. I don't know what to tell you. I suppose in a book, I'd confess that you have a secret twin brother, but I promise you don't. She laughed. He managed a smile. As the silence stretched out, he realized he was meant to reply to this, that a question had been asked and he had missed it. Eventually, he said, I guess I didn't really see him. I'll have a chat with Dr. Andrea next week, she said. Maybe this was a bad lot of patches. He nodded. Behind her, the timer dinged to take the lasagna out, and he watched her attention absent itself from him. He had not expected to be believed, he realized, but he had expected to be taken seriously. Some kind of scientific discussion or something. I did see him. I didn't see him. Clinical symptoms of Gismondi syndrome may include side effects of analgesic doses in pediatric. When a sudden trauma, the grief of a younger, the snake appearing like a magic trick, sleek blue thread turning in the darkness. I couldn't. He did it. I know what I saw. Why? Bunny writhed on his bed, tormented by the rattle of falling leaves, the television downstairs, tinned laughter, sci-fi sound effects. The bees. The ambulance. At last, he set up his own tablet, hit play on the longest film he could find, and turned the volume up. Inside Marty's room, again, the hungry breath, the dwindling feast of the beloved smell. The unused window hinges had rusted, though it opened further than its own. He eeled through, catching his tubing on the latch with a painful though bloodless jerk. He balanced on the sill and patted it gingerly back into place. This was against the rules. Dozens of rules, but he could not think of how else to begin to clear his name except to return to where the imposter had been sighted first. Reluctantly, he swung his leg clear and climbed down the roof, his trainer squeaking on the slick solar tiles. The stones were still fallen, but he stared at them, mouth trembling around a laugh. Real, not a dream. I thought you'd be back. He pronounced it Fort, and Bunny flinched, heart hammering at the suddenness of it. Do I say that too? Oh, but I must if he's copying me. The voice interested, higher than he thought, a certain whistle at the back of the throat. And again, the same pants and shirt, same face. Hello, something new. An angular purple bruise on the jaw already shading to green. Well, he hit us both, the boy said, and sat down on a stone, his expression sly and expectant. No, he didn't. If you're really real, of course I'm real. Who are you? How are you? And what did you do to Una? You don't even like Una. Well, no. Bunny had to admit that he had him there. But she's in hospital now, and the ambulance, the bees? Yes, that was part of it. Part of what? Aware that his voice had hit a register that should have killed any nearby bats, he collapsed on the opposite stone, still warm from the day's heat. If I could just get out my phone, well, no, they might not believe it. They'd think I did it on a timer or something. But if we both... Oh, who cares if they believe you? The boy said impatiently, making Bunny jump. Look, all right, yes, showing off the snake, not local, but it worked. We're all right. Where was it from? You can't get there with this spin, the boy said vaguely. Listen, come with us. Bunny frowned. A rattling shower of leaves swirled in the empty circle of the fallen stones, drove on into the darkness of the woods. Where? Where's not important. Well, then no, Bunny said, and began to slide off the stone. I'm going home, and whatever you're doing, knock it off, or else. Don't you want to know what we're doing? The sun was nearly down, the little clearing filled with violet light, rendering the other boy only visible by the wet glint of his eyes and the patch of gold thread on the St. Ninotinus school crest. His parents would come into his room soon if they hadn't already. See, he was gone. Marty came with us. Bunny grunted, transfixed. The name was a weapon, intended as one. He had felt its heft and flight even before the double's breath had shaped the initial letter. Could you die from this? From this hatred? Get his name out of your mouth. I'll kill you, liar. The work we're doing, it's the most important thing that's ever been done. And we're almost done. Everything we need has been put into motion. We can't stop. Marty knew all that, but we lost him. You didn't lose him. Bunny dried his face on his sleeve as he stalked out of the clearing, ignoring the boys' entreaties till they faded into silence. This excursion warranted, unreasonably in his opinion, a grounding, complete with hourly room checks and a highly visible, though not, he judged, staged conversation with the builder about having locks put on the windows. Bunny's world shrank to school and home, between which he was ferried with military precision by his mother or his mother's best friend, Mrs. Kiernan, who did not speak to him and could not be swayed from the chosen route. 8 minutes one way in the lofty champagne gold Range Rover. But the double remained, unrecordable when Bunny fumbled out his phone. He seemed to be going out of his way, if anything, to be seen where Bunny was still permitted to look. A cloud of bees smothering someone at a bus stop, and the boy laughing behind the plexiglass shelter. The boy climbing the ancient crusted roof of their only church, St. Agatha's, waving. The next day, the church was found to be desecrated in fashions thought not to be humanly possible, and the photographs made everyone ill. Bunny waited in furious hatred and dread for Officer Gupta to show up and arrest him, for dozens of witnesses to point at him in court. There, that's the one. Everyone knows him. Even Jamie would turn on him, he thought, let alone the snake thing. Una's parents might sue, and it was against the import laws on top of everything else. Shadowless, the double quartered the village like a spider, no matter the light, no matter the weather. Well, at least I've got alibis, and they know I couldn't climb the church. In late September, the school placed him on permitted medical absence, the other kids whispering, "Nutter," and worse as he hefted the brick-thick wad of worksheets and readings and climbed awkwardly into the Range Rover, seething. Anger was new. Everything seemed new now, but anger was particularly new, and he found that it frightened him. He had done what he was supposed to, followed directions, agreed to everything, told the grown-ups, like the ads at bus stops that urged you to press the emergency button, see it, say it, sort it. And all he'd gotten for it was house arrest, where he would not even have the minimal comfort of eating his gluten-free, soy-free, egg-free, nut-free, and sugar-free snacks on the wall with Jamie and speculating what was left to make a snack out of. "You had so little," the boy whispered that night from the lime tree outside Bunny's window. "And they took that too." "Shut up. Piss off." Crying? This could be it, you know, forever. "I'm not talking to you. They'll think I'm more nuts, not less," Bunny added, and rolled over in bed. The obvious thing would have been to shut the window, but the room was stifling, and the occasional breeze was the only thing making the top floor habitable. And I wasn't crying. In fact, he had been sobbing so hard and in such rigidly self-enforced silence that he had wrecked or janked something in his back. Vindictively, he hoped the double felt it too. "If you come with us, you could do whatever you wanted," the boy said. "That sounds like the kind of thing pervs say to lure kids into white vans." Marty agreed right away. "We thought we'd have to, I don't know, blackmail him, threaten you." Bunny stared at the far wall of his bedroom, trying to get his hands around this new pain. He hated having his back to the window, the fragile tube of the spine exposed, but he hated to see his own face looking back at him too. Gave him the motion sickness of reading in the car, eyes going one way, body another. And more than the nausea, he hated the thing that had grown within him since that first moment of realizing that the stone had spared him. It was unnamed, he would not name it, but it goaded him to both absorb and deny the boy's overtures. He listened to his rage-trembling breath and tried to listen for the boy's breath, hearing nothing. "Are you dead?" "Kind of a weird question, don't you think?" the boy said after a judicious pause. That was pretty rich coming from a boy with no shadow and no breath, but Bunny rolled over and sat up, finding himself nearly eye to eye with himself. "What are you standing on?" "I'm you, all right? Is that what you wanted me to say? It looks like magic, but it's not. It sounds like religion, but it's not. You saw what I did to the church bells? That was part of it." "They wouldn't let anyone see," Bunny said. He had refused dinner and felt lightheaded, half hypnotized, unsure who now stood on stars outside his room. Him? Someone else? "We're not gods, we who calculate. You know about gods. Studied them in class. Did that sculpture of Athena, see, on your desk." "Glass eyes," Bunny murmured. "Broken glass. We just make calculations. Like math. Like physics, Bun." The boy's pale hand scarred in minute pinpricks from 1,000 needle sticks pressed against the glass. "In maths, everything is made up. A number is just a number, like a ghost, no weight to it. In physics, all the equations have real things on both sides of the equal sign." "All right," Bunny said slowly. "Like in chemistry class, protons, electrons, and other things. Nothing exists but does not have an infinite symmetry somewhere. Nothing splits or burns or shifts but has its mirror or creates it moment by moment. There are worlds where all the time happens at once. There are worlds who have not received time yet. There are worlds in which it is a line, circles, spheres, loops. Worlds who receive a dose of time only at measured intervals. The laws are not constant, but average. Constants too are not constant, but change. We want to know what they are." They watched each other warily. Watery green-gray eyes met and glanced off. Bunny frowned. "You sound like church." "Gods are irrational," the boy sneered. "And I don't mean like irrational numbers. I mean, even if they existed, they created worlds so flawed they cannot operate as anything except the cauldron of chaos and randomness. That's not useful. Is it?" "What does it matter if something's useful?" Bunny almost said, then bit his lip. There it was, the moving thing inside him, like dislodged shrapnel. Because he had never been useful. had always been made to feel like a small but awkward and above all inconvenient burden carried by his parents, Marty, Jamie, his doctors, his teachers, like the pump and patches and pills that kept him alive. A calculation is a story, not like a story, is a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It cannot be called a story unless it does have an ending. Otherwise, it is a dream. They say God made the world, and nope, on the seventh day, that was not the ending. It is the end of the world, of course, because even in the scriptures, you cannot believe that it was a deity who made this world. It's too flawed. Maybe he let someone else do it. Perhaps even your Satan, your devil, just as irrational. Imagine inhabiting a herd of swine and not even calculating the distance to the edge of the cliff. Bunny shook his head, dazed. The boy went on, chuckling. Past efforts to calculate appearing in infinite places and times as relics, ghosts, unfinished books, broken artifacts, earthworks, tunnels, cloud formations, the shapes of roots, not signatures of the calculators, but items, real things. Did Bunny know the word palimpsest? He did not. We scrape them off and try again for a truer form. Often when we do, we know we are getting closer because other palimpsests correct themselves, like your standing stones, which could not be permitted to stand any longer. They were an abstraction to a number that wanted to be known. It was not like Tron, as Bunny ventured. The calculations could not be performed in virtual reality, which was too limited. The rules would be known from working with worlds. Is that where you're from? Another world? No, I told you, I'm you. The boy paused sympathetically. I carry the spin of my photons a little differently from yours, but listen, a non-infinite number of worlds are running the same calculations now, all wrong. All the failures are gone now, destroyed. This is our best shot. If we don't find the answer using this one, we might never find it. The answer. If all possibilities must be taken into account for the qualities of all possible variables, there must exist a world which is perfect, the boy said dreamily. Maybe more than one, where everything is known and can therefore be predicted and measured and controlled. You want to make it? Just find it. It's already been made. Sweat inched down Bunny's back and soaked into his boxers. The heat made it more unreal somehow, as if they were inching closer to, he dimly imagined, some astronomical body that was not their sun. Stop that, he told himself. It's just a hot night, and you're talking to yourself, and you didn't eat dinner. And that's all you want, he said again. You just want the answer. The boy nodded. Just to complete the calculations. What would you want me to do? Marty was a variable, the boy said somberly. Essential. But you could replace him as the closest proxima. More alike even than your parents thought you were by a coincidence of genetic assortment. I could? We've had to make other adjustments to make up for the lack of our calculated match, the boy said. A few variables being erased or substituted. Variables, things, but not people, though. Of course, people. They're part of the equation. They'll cancel out when we're done, though, like any number. I suppose about 2 billion people will be gone. I could find the exact number for you if you want. Do you? No. Bunny chewed his cheek. 3 people had already died, and this double was hinting that it was because the village had become a locus of frantic recalculation after Marty's death. The old man stung to death at the bus stop. 2 girls near the North Woods apparently poisoned by a perfectly innocent patch of blackberries. Game was becoming corrupt. You could not eat the local deer or rabbits, and even sunflowers had begun to kill birds that fed upon them. Their heavy-headed corpses poked out of bins, as if begging for another chance at life. Only yesterday, Bunny had somberly bagged the little corpses of hungry finches and wrens, clumsy in his mother's rubber gloves. This is great work we are doing. Imagine it. The perfect world. Is Marty there? He wanted to ask. Will I get to go there? Will you let me go to a world where I can? But those were not questions he thought the double would answer truthfully, only to manipulate him into saying yes. No one can make you say yes, Bunny, the boy said. It's too difficult to recalculate around an unwilling variable. You get to pick. Don't you want to be free? They won't let you. Bunny touched his chest absently, all scarred bone under thin skin, touched the smooth patch under his ear beneath its foil. What might I have said in another world? Think of it. A chosen one, a hero, the necessary component for once in my life. Once? Yes, only once. And the first time. And the last. He smiled. All right. 2 nights later, he arrived alone at the tiny curve of Warcombe Bridge and leaned against the iron railing, clutching the straps of his school bag in both hands. The walk to the woods had exhausted him, but based on the plans the boy had described, he did not need to be upright, only alive and willing to do what he was told. That was easy enough. It's the only thing I know how to do. The railing was cool under his cheek, though the bridge's stones appeared unaccountably to have been transformed into bone, a crisply interlocked jumble of pelvises and skulls, struts of femur, decorative ribs. He ignored this. Things had been happening that perhaps bore on the great work of the calculators, and perhaps did not. A satellite had been struck by a meteor over southern China, killing thousands when it crashed. Some kind of giant hornet, bioluminescent green and blue, had descended upon a town in America and carried off at least a dozen people. What world had that been from, Bunny wondered. If it had been destroyed for failing to calculate, maybe that was for the best. The double had been effortlessly and even mischievously persuaded to replace Bunny at dinner, leaving Bunny free to pack what he wished and slip unseen from the back garden. He had considered leaving a note, but could not think of what to say. He had not even answered Janie's worried texts. You only have one friend, the boy said blithely. That's one more than you really need if you have meaning in your life. You'll see. Through the woods arrived strangers, silent on the dead leaves, human faces, smudges in the dark, and other things, floating or glowing or both, and things with legs who had no shadows. There was a place, he thought, where the double's shadow moved without the body, just as here the body moved without the shadow. An atom of anything was still that thing, they'd been taught, but one atom of a person wasn't that person. How many atoms did you need? Were all of his here? Bunny did not think that his questions would get answered before the calculation was completed. The double had come behind the others, the stripes on his trainers bright in the moonlight. As he stood next to Bunny, they met like teeth. How will we know it's done? Bunny whispered. The boy smiled. We'll know. An object was placed in his hand, ridged and cold, perhaps a bar of some light metal. A thin crown was slid onto his head, anchored in curls. Don't let go, someone whispered in a voice that he thought bypassed both ear and the delicate membranes of his ears. I won't let go. He breathed, listened to the others not breathing, the wind whispering in the half-stripped trees, the trickle of the war beneath their feet. That soft, slow, deep water, narrowly banked, too hot now for any fish that had evolved in it, so clear you could see 10 yards straight to the bottom. He curled his fingers tightly around the engraved bar. It won't bring him back, my vanished brother, my blood closer than blood, the one they really wanted. Nothing brings him back. Only this, that I be free in a way that he could not be free, that I do what must be done in a way that he would not do, that they gave me this chance to calculate and to sabotage. They did not chant or dance or sway or speak, and perhaps now because he was the substitute, Bunny felt the calculations begin all the same, knowing that somewhere a landslide was erasing part of a mountain, a laptop had rebooted unexpectedly, a shark had beached itself and stared at the Milky Way with eyes baffled by the clear air. The wind stopped. In a way that, or did he? He must have thought of this too. All right, Bunny thought with sudden voluptuous relief, his jealousy and fear falling away like sweat. Maybe he did too. And in one fluid movement, placed his foot on the curve of a pelvis and vaulted over the bridge. Weighted by the backpack full of stones, he was lost to sight in moments. He woke and froze, processing the theory that his half-conscious mind had been reporting. A familiar place, the sounds and smell of a hospital, the well-known presence of his parents, untouching, human motion detectors ready to alarm at the slightest sign of him moving. And when he realized this, the magnitude of his failure felt intensely real, like a hand over his face. His heart still beat, his mother's nails clicked on her phone screen. He was alive, too alive. I was so sure. Well, hang on though. If every possibility happened somewhere, if every one. He opened his eyes. They allowed him to go home after the battery of tests required to see whether he was stable, whether his disease was stable, whether he had lost too many neurons under the still warm water, whether he had freshwater brain parasites. The Cowers had stopped by, and Jamie had left a note under the big towel-swathed ceramic pot that they had deposited on the stoop. It was so heavy, both Bunny's parents had to wrestle it inside while he held the door open. It turned out to be a roast dinner, with a supplementary foil packet of garlic naan. Bunny held Jamie's unopened note tightly in his right hand and ate with his left, everything too bright, too salty, after the hospital food. He could not bear to open the note and see whether her writing had changed. For his village had been subtly but sinisterly modified, and he had said nothing on the drive. Dewey's had been replaced with a Brewery's. The Smiths-Taylor sign was crossed scissors now instead of the swirling S of their tape measure. The Duke's head had become the Queen's head. The red brick of their house was dove gray now, though the second-hand book he had been reading on Marty's bed still reared its scuffed worm from the scuffed sand, waiting for him to return, take up the hooks, ride into the desert. No one spoke as they ate. Bunny stared at the thin crown on the table, plucked from his sodden hair, and forgave them their silence. He stayed up all night, fighting the somnolence of his overfull stomach, scrolling through the news on his tablet. No mass deaths, nothing stranger than usual. Even the reports of the fallen satellite, the impossible hornets, were gone. It was not proof that he had succeeded, but seemed to be proof that something had failed. At dawn, he returned to the fallen stones. Upright again, their shadows stretched all the way through the woods, across the downs, into the changed village. Bunny waited till the sun was up and the birds had quieted, waiting for a rustle in the trees, a now familiar voice, and he could not have said all of the reasons he was waiting, to gloat, to demand, to commiserate, perhaps just to speak and to be spoken to. But no one came, and he stroked the weird as he left the clearing, whispering comfort to the stone, as one might a much younger child. The end. Oh, sorry, I went over time.
It was worth it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Premee. That was amazing. Both of you read wonderful stories tonight. I'm just going to wrap us up here because we are running short on time, but next week we have another great show lined up. We have Craig Lawrence Gidney, and what I think is the first Story Hour reader zooming in from Australia, J.A. Haig. And I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of, just to see if there are any changes. Storyhour2020.com is also a good place to learn about upcoming authors. And you can watch any programs you may have missed on the Story Hour page on Facebook. In fact, you can just watch your favorites as many times as you want. Premee and Stephen, thank you both so much for sharing your stories with us tonight. They were wonderful. And thank you to my co-host, Daniel Marcus. Welcome back.
Thanks.
And thank you, all of you here tonight, all of you joining us at some point in the future, for being part of Story Hour and helping us to spin this fictive dream together. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Laura.